the education industry, I think, is usually lagging behind because we don't have that level of flexibility and leeway for innovation, because you've got superintendents and boards that are afraid of what could happen if we try to branch out and do something different.
Welcome back to Around the District. I'm Nicole Brown. I'm here with Armando Montero. We're going to continue the conversation on funding in Arizona schools. So Arizona consistently ranks near the bottom per student nationally. So from your perspective, what steps should the state take to improve funding for students?
Yeah, well, and I think this is obviously one of my biggest issues in running for the state legislature with my experience in the school board. And like you stated, we've consistently ranked in the bottom of public education across the nation. Everyone's aware of this, but not much is being done. And I think that there's many reasons for that, even beyond just, per pupil funding. Arizona has ranked in the bottom for a wide variety of different metrics, even related to student outcomes. And while I think there's a relationship there, I think there's so many different aspects to it that's just beyond funding. Obviously, we need to fully fund our public schools. I think, we have an antiquated school finance formula. 5 years on a school board, and I can tell you that most of us have no idea how it works and, the process of how it's done, but we've seen that it's not equitable across the state. And so I think, number one, we need to take a look at that and how we're funding our schools in the first place. I think that for districts that have to rely on bonds and overrides, for example, we're seeing that even districts that don't have we're lucky in Tempe Union to have a community that continuously supports public education, but we've seen just last month that there are districts that aren't that fortunate because a lot of misinformation about what is going on in our public schools.
I'm going to stop you there because I think it's a combination of misinformation, for sure, messaging being another one, but also people are just not that smart or maybe educated when it comes to how government works, state or federal. You know what I mean? And I think that impacts a lot of decisions that are being made, and a lot of people are voting against their own interest. My personal opinion is that somebody at the very top of this, in the presidential role wants us to be dumb and uneducated, and dumb might not be the right word, but uneducated about how things work because it benefits people who just want to put in policies that impact the 1%. So that floats all the way down, which people don't understand, from federal to state, and then local elections are impacted, which means our everyday lives are impacted.
Yeah.
So that's going to go to what happens in the midterm elections and why that's important. But you said one of the things that Arizona talked about, or funding for Arizona, is the EAS, EAS vouchers.
Oh, yes, the ESA vouchers, yes.
Did I say it wrong? ESA vouchers.
Yes.
I did say it wrong. ESA vouchers. That's why you looked at me like, what the hell
I was like, wait, what were we talking about?
Okay, so I digressed. So ESA vouchers. So how is that really impacting funding for Arizona schools?
Yeah. So, I think since we've seen the universal expansion of school vouchers, I think we have seen already a problematic landscape of underfunding in public education, but then you add this on top of it, which allows, I think it's, the idea of school choice has been something that's been talked about a lot, not just in Arizona, but across the nation. But I think there's a lot of misinformation around what ESAs are and actually do, right? I think we heard a lot from the majority in the legislature that the reason that we're giving universal vouchers is that so low-income kids that are in public schools that may not be meeting their needs can go and enroll in a private or charter school that does that. But we've seen now that 70 to 80% of the families that are taking these vouchers have never even attended a public school in the first place. I'm sure we've seen all over the news the types of things that are being bought with the ESA money because there's a minimal level of accountability and transparency with the program. Anything under a certain amount, the Department of Education is just approving without even looking at it.
Right. Which is scary.
It is.
People are using it for home improvement and things to that sort.
Right. I mean, the ways that our schools are funded is based on how many students we have enrolled. And so when you have a student leaving the system and taking that pot of money with them, it's a decent amount of money that aren't going to our public school system. We can't meet the needs of having higher salaries for our teachers to be competitive with recruitment and retention of our surrounding states. When it comes to having outdated school facilities, this is another thing. I think something that's good that has happened in the past couple of months was the capital litigation lawsuit that came down from the Maricopa County Superior Court, that the School Board Association and a couple of others joined in on suing the state, saying, hey, the ways that we are funding the capital of our schools, of our school system and our school districts is inadequate and it's unconstitutional. And the court said yes. So now the legislature is tasked. Obviously, they're going to appeal it, and this will take years. But if it holds, like, we have to revamp the way that we fund our capital needs of our schools, because our buildings are outdated. We don't have the money to fix them, and we're so focused on being in survival mode that we don't have the opportunity to pay attention to that. Again, bonds and overrides, we're fortunate to be able to have a community that gives us those funds and says yes, but that's not the case for a lot of districts.
And isn't it sad that you have to file a lawsuit to have the state legislators actually do something that benefits public schools in the state of Arizona?
Yes.
I mean, the folks that are in the majority seem to not care about that issue, and it makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
By the time it goes through and is heard on an appeal and things of that sort, it'll be different folks on the school boards, on all the school boards, and it'll be different folks in the legislature. So hopefully there'll be some balance there.
Yeah.
But my question would be, charter schools. How do they impact funding and enrollment in the public school system?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, our charter schools are still technically public schools, and there's a lot of them here, even in LD12. But I think the part that we miss a lot is the level of accountability that charters and privates are held to, right? We as public schools are held to a very specific standard in the ways that we are graded and funded and all the things. That level of accountability is not there for charters and publics, and so I think, or for privates, and I think that's really something that needs to be, even with talking about ESAs, for example. I think that there needs to be certain strings attached, that if you're taking those funds or enrolling students with those funds, these are public money. This is taxpayer dollars. So why should they be not held to the same standard or level of accountability that our public schools are? And so I think that that's something that the legislature, needs to be paying more attention to, because in many ways, 5 years on a school board, the ways that we hold our schools accountable in many ways stifles innovation, right? We're pigeonholed to certain metrics that we need to focus on and improve for us to get funding. And so I think ways that allow our school districts to be more flexible and be more innovative. The education industry, I think, is usually lagging behind because we don't have that level of flexibility and leeway for innovation, because you've got superintendents and boards that are afraid of what could happen if we try to branch out and do something different. I think the pandemic was a wake-up call in the sense that we know the way that we are educating students doesn't serve a large portion of our student population.
Right. A lot of people want it to be the same as before, or something that they've always done without having upgraded to the way society is today.
Yeah.
So what do you think you will bring, if elected, as a state representative in LD12? What do you think you're going to bring to the state capitol that will change the way we see, or, funding or even public education?
Yeah, well, I would think hopefully my experience on the school board could be something that would be of value to the conversation. I think being on the receiving end of all of the policies that have been put in place by our state legislature, I've directly seen on the ground what the impact of that is. Having to do an annual budget every year with the decisions that are being made, I've been there making the tweaks and adjustments based on what we're seeing from the legislature and the level of uncertainty that we continuously have every single year. And so hopefully kind of bringing that perspective of being on the ground, would help kind of inform some of the conversations that we're having at the legislature, because, while funding is obviously very important, that's not the only piece that needs to be addressed when it comes to public education, right? I think we've seen that, and data shows that, we could have more money in the public school system, but if we don't have effective policies to supplement that as well, we're not going to get the results that we want to see. That comes with, teacher recruitment and retention, student discipline, a whole bunch of other things that I think the state legislature has a role in, an important role in, that I would hopefully be able to tackle and bring a little bit of experience to.
Good. Well, then let's talk about the social issues and how that impacts the school boards. And then what you might do about moving forward if elected as a state representative. Immigration and the issue on students coming to school or being afraid to come to school, and on banned books. So Tempe Union, I know that you guys had some policies around that, and I know that there was a board meeting where somebody came in and didn't even live in Arizona, but came to the school board meeting and caused some chaos around books and that are in the school district. So talk about those aspects and what it's like dealing with parents and the public.
Yeah, well, I think on the first issue, yes, immigration was something that at the beginning of this year, when the Trump administration took office, is something that we put a spotlight on as a school district, because we wanted to ensure that all of our students are protected and feel safe on our schools, no matter what their status is. And so we had passed a resolution and we had revised our policies to ensure that we had a proper procedure in place, that in the case that federal law enforcement comes to one of our campuses, we have a procedure in place so that our administrators and our staff don't freak out or do something that, infringes on a student's constitutionally protected rights. And so a lot of what we did beyond those procedures was also informing students of what their rights are. Because in many ways, I think that they don't know. And so if we have something that's able to tell them that what their rights are, and especially when they're on school campuses, where they might not be able to contact a parent or a family member, is super important. And so that's one of the first things we did early this year to make sure that we're protecting all of our students, because everyone deserves to have a good education, no matter where they're from. And so that's something that I think our board unanimously, was passionate about and agreed on. But then the second part around like banning books, for example, ever since I've been on the board, school boards have had a national spotlight for a lot of different, culture war, social issues. And so one, obviously we want to protect all of our students, and we've done that. I think part of what our mission as a board in Tempe Union is that we have prided ourselves on welcoming every single student and making them feel welcomed in our schools. And that's obviously related to inclusion policies, making sure that our students of color, LGBTQ plus students feel safe and are welcomed. And we've passed resolutions recognizing things and making sure they feel welcome. But the other side of it is we also know that when we get disruptors that are outside the district or things like that, it doesn't have an impact on what we're there to do and our students and our student outcomes. And, we hear a lot of misinformation about what's happening in our schools. When we talk about, the whole ordeal around DEI and critical race theory, every time I've gotten an email from a parent about it, I'm like, have you actually talked to the teacher and asked what's being taught in the classroom? Usually the answer is no. And so that's the first step. And usually we don't hear from them again.
Should ask them what is critical race theory even mean. They won't know.
Yes.
One thing that I wanted to really talk about is engagement from younger folks. But I think one thing that Tempe, well, let me go back and say this. Tempe U school district, all A+, right? What are you guys what is your grading?
So last year we got A's across the board.
A's across the board,
schools, and half of them have A+. The other ones are going out for their A+ distinction. Actually, I think yesterday they just had their visit. So hopefully we'll see some more coming soon. Yes.
Okay, and I want to say that's why you're all A+, because you're doing some things that really impact students of all nationality, races, color, and whatever group they belong to. So stay tuned. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about engagement from our younger voters, and we want to get more. So this is Nicole Brown, Around the District. Make sure you subscribe, save, share, whatever you do on social media, please do it. And we'll be back. Stay tuned for the next episode.